In this second video of our two-part video series, we're going to continue diving into the top free expert advisors on the MQL5 marketplace to see which strategies are the best. So in last week's video, I actually went and chose 5 different expert advisors, 4 from the MQL5 marketplace and 1 from ourselves, which are all 100% free to see how they would perform in a live forward test. So the first one we can see here is the Node Neural EA for MT5, which is trading, I believe, on the euro dollar, and it is using a sort of recovery-based system as well, but with significant amounts of precision. We were also looking at the Hedging martingale EA, which, as the name would suggest, is using a hedging martingale style, where it's alternating buy and sell orders with increasing lot size. We were also looking at a more traditional EA in the range breakout EA that has no recovery and is simply entering with a buy stop and a sell stop. We were also looking at probably the most famous free EA, which is the Dark Venus, and is a very popular grid martingale style bot. But the developer here, Marco, is a good guy, and he does try and take care of his clients as well, as do many of these developers who are very qualified individuals. We were also looking at our fantastic Ultimate Time Bomb EA, which is based on a range breakout as well, and is a very, very good bot. So this is also a free bot, obviously, so that we're comparing apples to apples. And really in this first video, we broke down the strategies in depth. We went and spoke about how they trade, what the logic is behind them. But today we're going to look at performance. How exactly did they perform over a 1-week forward test? And to do so, let's pull up MT5 here, where you can see that we had the Dark Venus, we had Hedging Martingale, we had Neural Network EA for the Node Neural EA for MT5, and we also had the range breakout. I actually ended up putting our bots in a separate account so that we're able to see them on multiple different pairs. But what we can see here, and if we kind of go over the performance, is there's a few things that definitely stand out. And I've actually taken the liberty of sorting these out in an Excel file just so we can filter by the exact bot. Yes, we can obviously just press here and filter by comment. However, you can't really sum as easily if you do this, so it makes assessing total performance a bit more challenging. A few things to note is that the ones with the no comment, those were from the range breakout EA. Whereas if we look at the ones that say buy stop, sell stop, my understanding is those are also part of the Hedging Martingale EA, quite simply because these are the only ones which are trading on gold. So that would kind of make sense that if we look at the symbols, that these orders must also be coming from the Hedging Martingale EA. If we look at the Node Neural EA, it's also commenting all of its different positions. And as you can see, it actually had a 100% win rate, and it didn't even open any scaling positions, which was extremely impressive. And then finally, we go to the range breakout EA. Oh, sorry, pardon me. Already touched on the range breakout EA. The Dark Venus, as you can see, is obviously leaving an absolute boatload of positions where it's just opening tons and tons and tons of positions. And even right now, if we look at the live account, we are currently floating in loss with quite a few different Dark Venus positions. And over the span of the week, we made $329 in profit, but with obviously commissions and swaps, we only made $251. And right now we're floating in loss at around $148. So that was kind of the total results for the week. The majority of that loss coming from the Dark Venus. So now let's actually go and look at this on a bot by bot basis. So what I did is I actually took the bot out, I took this report out, and I matched all of these comments to the orders which we can see here in the history. Unfortunately with MT5, you can't actually export the comments, which is extremely annoying because you have to go through and manually match the orders, but I did take the liberty of doing that. So now we can go here, for instance, and see if we filter by Dark Venus, we can see that so far the Dark Venus made, if we add up all the profits, let me just do this real quick. The Dark Venus made $147.95. However, the Dark Venus is also currently floating $152 in loss. So even with its recovery function, unfortunately the Dark Venus was more of a break-even bot this week, and it placed an absolute boatload of orders. So if you're looking for a bot that trades a lot, the Dark Venus is definitely there. I'm not saying it's a bad bot. Many people have had tremendous amounts of success with this, and 1 week is really not that statistically significant. However, one thing to note is this is not a very selective bot. It seems to just trade a whole bunch, and it does heavily rely on the grid. So I'm thinking that the initial entry is really not that sophisticated. It's a pretty simple Bollinger Band based entry, and really the reason why it has an edge is it's relying on grids. The issue is the more kind of random the initial trade is in a grid martingale system, generally speaking, the higher the odds of blowing are. Just because if you just kind of randomly enter, and if you don't really have much of an edge, you're going to need to really open several different positions to effectively manage an initial position. And because of that, I would say this is probably a riskier grid martingale bot because it's not very precise and it just really heavily relies on scaling in order to make any money. So now we can move on to our second bot, the hedging martingale, and this one was actually quite cool. So as you can see, like, it is actually scaling a bit more aggressively, and this kind of makes sense because it's not doing a basic grid. It's going from like 1 to 2 to 5 to 14, so we're seeing significantly more aggressive scaling, but it doesn't open nearly as many positions in a level. This one here made $189, and granted, these are all the martingales started at the lowest possible risk level, so 0.01 lots, and then they all scaled from there. So this one here, it was pretty similar in terms of performance to the Dark Venus. However, it's not holding a loss. So its performance, if we look at the total one, including the floating loss, is significantly better. So this was actually quite good. It also did not take a huge amount of positions, which was also great. It was a lot more selective than the Dark Venus. And if we look at the actual chart here, we can see that it wasn't really opening a grid. It was really doing as Faircom suggests, where it replaces, let's say, a buy order with a sell order at the stop loss. So here, if we stop out on order number 1, the second order will enter in the opposite direction with an increased lot size. So it did exactly what he said it was going to do, and that was also very good. So it's clearly an honest bot. It is working. It does scale a little bit aggressively for my liking, but he does give you a bunch of set files which help you reduce the risk and make it a bit more conservative. So I was quite impressed with this bot personally. We can now look at the third bot here, which is the node bot. And this was just incredibly impressive. It had a 100% win rate despite using a grid martingale or some sort of scaling system. So this is, well, unfortunately, it's mixing up with the Dark Venus, but it was very impressive, so very selective. I don't know what the catastrophic risk is with this bot because we didn't see any scaling. That's the only thing which makes me a little bit nervous. We know that this is a recovery style bot, and the performance was excellent. However, we could have also just gotten lucky and just not have seen a more like deep grid or the need to use recovery. And because it has a 100% win rate, we can't really assess the worst case scenario, which is not ideal. But overall, the one thing that I'd say is that this bot is a lot more selective than the other ones. It seems to be a bit more cautious when taking its initial position. Doesn't mean it won't blow your account. However, it's being more selective as opposed to taking more of a spray and pray approach that the Dark Venus appears to be taking. And now, finally, of these MQL5 bots, we can look at the range breakout. And this one was slightly negative, but frankly, with a real bot, you have no idea. Like over 1 week, it could be positive, it can be negative. It's just not statistically significant enough to give us an idea. And we can see here what it was doing. If it just happened to be a bit of a choppier week, we're not going to see that same level of performance. So ultimately, I think this was all a good style of bot. It seemed to be trading fairly reasonably. However, you're not going to have the same level of consistency with a bot which is not a martingale than a bot which is a martingale. And the problem with martingales, though, is when they're inconsistent, they can blow up your account. So martingales are kind of good until they're not, and they go boom. Whereas real trading systems, generally speaking, you will have weeks where you have losing weeks, you'll have winning weeks. That's what a real trading system is like. But the overall catastrophic risk is significantly lower. But of this bunch, the Dark Venus was not exactly my favorite, but the other ones seem to all have some degree of merit. And they all seem to be reasonably well designed. Dark Venus has been around for a long time. I just don't love the spray and pray approach personally, because I think you are taking on unnecessary risk by not having your first position be a lot more selective. But people love it. It's been around forever. So what do I know? There must be something to it. Here now I wanted to show you guys our ultimate time bomb bots, and as you guys can see, like, we started this trial, this experiment on the 6th, and had you been trading from the 6th to today, we would have only had one loss. Oh, let me just move my head here real quick. We would have only had one loss of 1,070, And the rest, like, yes, obviously we had other losses in the past, but was still nice and profitable. And we would have actually, the rest of them would have been winners. So our bot would have done spectacularly well because we would have had one loss and we would have had many winners, some of which were even bigger than the loss. So that would have been a very, very good performance of our ultimate time bomb on gold. Now, I think I initially had ran it on US 30. So let's go check that one out here. And you can see last week on US 30 was not the greatest week. We had 3 little losses. However, we had a couple, 3 winners as well. So not the greatest week on US 30. So to wrap up our video, you can see that really there's 2 types of bots. If we look at range breakouts, sometimes you can have amazing, amazing weeks, or with most real like non-recovery trading systems, you'll have these amazing weeks, but you can also have some slightly negative weeks. And it's kind of, there's a bit more variance when you're not using a recovery system. Whereas with recovery, you can sometimes have like long stretches of perfect no losing trades. However, you can have those catastrophic blow-ups. So it really comes down to what style you prefer and how you prefer to manage your risk. And really it comes down to as well on if you're trading more prop or if you're trading with personal capital and just the account size more broadly. So today we looked at a few examples of some great free bots. You can see a couple which are more range breakout based, a couple which are more, or a few which are more recovery based. And this should give you an idea as to what I look for when assessing a bot. I hope the video was helpful, guys, and I will see you in the next one.